Good morning. Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We are continuing our study of Matthew's Gospel, and we're going to be finishing up chapter 5, reading verses 43 through 48. This is part of the larger section where Jesus is teaching us to read our Bibles. He's teaching us to read the Bible for the purpose of discerning the will of God and then living by that will. And so the last example that he gives in verse 43 is the second part of the great commands. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor, and the word says, as yourself, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. But they have added the phrase, and hate your enemy. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, in order that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Don't even the tax gatherers do the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Therefore, you are to be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. That's a tall order. If Vladimir Putin needed a kidney, or he would die, and you were the only person on earth who matched him, would you give him a kidney? It would certainly, in our minds, simplify a great deal of things if Vladimir Putin were no longer on the world stage. Would you give him a kidney? I think Jesus says we must. I do. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, they believe that. That's why when Jesus taught the parable of the Good Samaritan, he was answering a man who asked, who is my enemy? It's in Luke chapter 15. It's a really cool passage because, Luke chapter 10, excuse me, because Jesus, in this instance, asks the man what the greatest commands are. The man wants to know, he's a lawyer, and Jesus says, well, what do you think? How do you read the law? And the man said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That the 613 laws of the Old Testament are actually, condensed into the 10 Commandments, which are then condensed into these 2 commands. And it's the right answer. It's the answer Jesus himself gives when he is asked. And Jesus says that's the right answer. But Jesus also then reminds us that those 2 can also be further clarified. They can be further unified by a single word, and that word is love, agape love. We love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, strength, and mind. And if we have that love, then we will value other human beings with agape love, because God does. You can't love God, as John will point out, whom you haven't seen, and hate your brother whom you have. You can't do that. It's impossible to maintain love for God if you hate someone. Jesus admits that we have enemies. The Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 12 says, as much as it lies within your sphere of activity, be at peace with other people. But other people don't always let that happen. People will strike the pose of our enemy, whether we want them to or not. He doesn't say that we won't have enemies. We won't have people who are trying to harm us, trying to destroy us. And he doesn't say we have to have the same connection of affection to them that we have with our best friend. But we have to love them and value them as human beings because God does. And when we do that, then we are like our Father in heaven, because that's the way he is. He values everybody. We as God's children have that relationship with God. And he's invited everyone to be his child, but not everyone is his child. And so not everyone has the same relationship with God. Then in the same way, we don't have the same loving relationship with everyone else as we have with our own children or our own parents. We just don't. Those are the facts. But there's the value of the human life that we respect, because that human life is precious to God. God causes the rain to fall equally or not to fall equally on everyone. It's not determined by how righteous you are. That's not how the world works. We expect it to. Why am I having this challenge when I'm such a good person? And that person across the street is awful. He's a slumlord. He's bad to his kids. He's bad to his wife. He kicks his dog. And look at how well he's doing. You know, we sing farther along. We'll know all about it. We don't have to know about it farther along. We know about it now. God doesn't act that way. He doesn't just give the good people the goodies. I mean, the world is as it is, and it operates as God has established it to operate. And we need to be respectful of and value every human life as God values every human life. And if we are not, then we can't keep the first great command. We just can't, because they are necessarily tied together. Okay, we'll talk about expressing that love for God and how it causes us to love other people when we begin with chapter 6 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.